We hit a population of a limitation that's almost upon us in the early 60s. We know one more doubling of the human population would destroy all life on Earth. Just around that time, the women's movement took hold. And at first, we were seeking greater identity, greater equality. And we more or less in our culture have achieved, we're a long way towards that. But it's pretty obvious we don't want to be equal to something in a dying world. We don't want to be equal to something in a world that isn't working. Right. So what's happening in the woman, and I also believe in the man, but particularly in the evolving woman, is a rising up of the sexual desire to join your genius to reproduce the species into a suprasexual creative drive to express yourself, to give your gift, to be more of who you are. And to do that, you have to join your genius, not your genes, but your creativity with other people's genius, two or more. And when you do, it's explosive, it's creative, it's joyful, it's making love at the next level. So I believe that we're experiencing now vocational arousal. Just like we get sexual arousal is nature's way of getting us to reproduce the species. We can't, so we're shifting from maximum procreation to co-creation, from self-reproduction to self-evolution. And I believe just about every woman I know, particularly the ones over 50, 50, 60, 70, 82, this of creativity is a vital force. I'm sure it's a force of nature. And it's a force of love and creativity coming forward in the feminine co-creator, seeking to join team mating rather than just mating, whether with men and women, so that it doesn't go immediately into romantic sexuality. It goes up here into co-creativity. It could have a sexual component, which is better if you're doing this than if you're just doing this.
Yeah, totally. So
I think we may have tapped into nature's greatest force after self-reproduction. Now that's a lot.
Yeah. It does seem, too, there are women, there's a woman who works for me, and I've talked to younger women as well, who have, to some degree, also chosen not to have children. There are some that are in tune with it, that wanting that kind of connection, not that you can't have children and do that whole thing, but they're actually attuned to this, what you're speaking about as well, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. It is, and I've known who are making a very deep social, spiritual decision because part of their body wants to have a baby. Totally. It's really programmed in there. We're wired for wanting to have a baby, and then, but they also want to give birth to that greater creativity. And it's true, if you have a baby, for years, it really takes a lot of your attention. You don't want to have a baby if you're not wanting.
Yeah, totally.
To give that. So I have children starting in 1951. Before I knew anything about any of this, and towards the end, let's say by my fourth or fifth child, I knew something was missing. Yeah. Much as I loved my children, what was missing was the vocation. And I think we have unique callings, everybody, every one of us. Yeah. As we have a unique genetic code, we have a unique genius code. Very few people have been lucky enough to have that genius code, their creativity expressed. And so that was like the artists and the geniuses and the scientists of the world. Now, my theory is it's going to become millions of us. It is millions of us. Waking up everywhere. And it's not a new religion. It's not a new organization. It's an emerging person.
Yeah. There's also, it seems too, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like there's almost a tantric element to what you're saying, which is it's not just between the two. There's also this divine connection. So there's an awakening, I feel in myself, in my own evolution, like I'm awakening spiritually and I'm awakening to more of my essential self. Out of my partnering with Jeff, Jeff is my teaching partner, and we totally have this relationship So it
Yes.
seems like there's a triangle element to it. I don't know if that's well said, but
I agree. And the way I think of it is, my favorite map is the spiral
yeah.
of evolution. And here's our turn on the spiral. Well, running through that spiral is a core or a consciousness force or an implicate order or impulse of evolution, as Andrew calls it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that impulse of evolution is the driving force of evolution, of which the external world is continually manifesting higher order, higher consciousness. What's happening to me and millions of us is that impulse of evolution that used to break through in very great special people, avatars, religious founders, scientists, visionaries, artists, is breaking through in millions of us as a yearning to express our own creativity, not somebody else's. And that creativity coming from the impulse of creation is like the creator within, the God within. And the God within, in that older language, wants to create. And if it doesn't want to procreate, it's going to want to create. So for me, co-creation is a high spiritual path.
Absolutely. And like you said, the feeling, because I'm in the midst of it. I'm actually, it's interesting too, like as a 59-year-old woman, right? Feeling this new level of having suitors, of like, these men that I want to create with. And it's so divine because it is sexy. I mean, there's a really sexy, yummy, ecstatic part to it.
I have a couple of men in my life that I would think of as supra-sexual co-creators.
Yeah.
And when we're together, it's so wonderful. It's so freeing. And I believe that the joy of unlocking your own genius, and by that I mean your set of creative capabilities, your set of impulse of expression, when you do that, just think of this for a moment. The absolute miracle of a sperm hitting an egg, and you've seen those pictures, and then it's doubling, and then there's this and this, and then there's the heart, and then there's the head, and there's a top. Now, that is deeply designed by billions of years of experiment and practice, you might say. Joining genius to co-create is much newer because most humans have not had a chance to do it, or we're in separate disciplines or silos or separated. So when nature starts getting us to attract to create, like you're feeling with Jeff, I've often felt it with Stephen Dinan, who is the CEO of Shift Network. We get together, and what seems to happen, because I'm very conscious of this, is there's forces fusing. Like if you think of a sperm is coded and an egg is coded, and when they join, something greater than sperm or egg is joining, and it has a pattern of growth, which forms the zygote, the fetus, and the infant. It's my intuition that we're very early in the phase of finding these partners where the pattern of growth is revealed to us through resonance, through love, through excitement. And if you try to do it through planning or mental or power or dense or submissive, you can't do it. The vocational arousal fades.
It's totally.
And you lose your ability.
I so love that you said that, because I've watched, and even with, some of my, spiritual brothers that I adore, where they're still coming from strategic partnership. Do you know what I mean? There's still this quality where, well, they'll do this and they've got this list and somebody else has got that and they're going to do it together, but they're going to do their own thing separately together. Is not this. You actually have to fall in love and be willing to surrender together to something like the baby meme, the new meme that begins to, the thought form that starts to happen. And it's more of a love affair.
Patricia, we're having on March 22nd, I don't know when this program is going to be aired, but we're having something called Conception Day.
Oh, really? Where?
And yes, well, it's going to be in Los Angeles as well as on internet, and you will be sent information on that. And what it's about is making love together in many local venues, as well as the one we'll have in Los Angeles. And the idea is, how do we make a baby planetary civilization?
Yes.
How do we produce a culture which none of us have ever lived in before?
Right.
A global, sustainable, compassionate, co-creative, evolvable. Okay, we're co-creating a baby. And it's a very big baby. And just like the two lovers coming together, they have no idea, if they do conceive, of what the baby will be. So we don't actually know, if we co-create and conceive this way, what the culture is going to be like that we create. But we can be pretty sure, if we're doing it in love, and if we're joining these creative gifts that we have, that what's going to come out of this is greater than we can even conceive. You see,
Beautiful.
Isn't that a beautiful analogy between conception for the zygote baby and conception for planetary culture?
And if you're attuned, like in the way that you're saying it, I know that for Jeff and I, and there's somebody else that I'm beginning to work with, you can actually feel, because we're sensitive and we're paying attention, that it does have a life of its own. It's like there's something, you think you're coming together, you know, the two people make love and you think, well, this is the kind of baby we might have.
Yes.
But then the baby shows up and it actually starts to show who they are to you. And then you are then in service of it in a certain way, which is a different kind of creativity than forcing something into existence or having a preconceived pattern that you're trying to overlay. And so I do feel like there's also a feminine, you know, there is a quality to what you're speaking to that really invites, it's an invitation to the feminine, a certain way of being that I don't think has been as present in creativity.
I agree. And one of the ways we're talking about this, if it's two or more people, it's a hub. And if you can visualize the spiral and the wheel, the hub of the wheel is I think it's a new sacred space symbolically.
Absolutely.
And the sacred space is a shared space in which the impulse of evolution is coming through two or more simultaneously.
Right.
So what you're joining when you're joining your own creativity is also the genius of evolution.
Absolutely. And then it takes over.
Wow.
Well, that's like Tantra. I mean, real Tantra is you come together and then you start to meet, and then eventually it's not you anymore. It uses you to go places that, I mean, it's no longer about you. Okay, welcome back. This is Patricia Albere, and I'm speaking with Barbara Marx Hubbard about Supra-Sex. And her, just to make sure that I say it here, and we'll talk about it at the end, if you want to find out more about what Barbara's doing, she has a new book called Emergence, which we'll talk more about towards the end of the call. It's at evolve.org. Right. www.evolve.org. So to continue on with our Supra-Sex conversation.
Okay.
And actually, when you were speaking about it, I was thinking, you know, the funny thought of like, it's like Supra-Sex orgies would be this kind of coming together with the multiple beloveds, you know, that. And so the Evolutionary Collective, which you have to come visit the work that we're doing collectively, because we have a really amazing group of people that's what we're doing. I mean, it actually is this sort of creative and a level of intimacy and connection from our essential selves that is just, it's beyond ecstatic. I don't even know how to express it. So
wonderful.
It's fun. So tell me, what do you think? So, you know, one of the things that you were saying in one of the interviews that I listened to was you were saying, like, as this starts to happen, so as this starts to happen with people, there can be almost like on a sexual level, it's like being irresponsible, like a teenager, like you want to write a book with somebody and then you want to create this and do that, you know. I mean, talk a little bit about the level of maturity and what are some of the things that we should be aware of so that we can really honor this sacred emergence of this quality of Supra-Sex.
Well, I have a phrase, suprasexual promiscuity.
I've seen it.
And premature synergy.
That's
Now,
good.
suprasexual promiscuity is pretty obvious. Is you're very vocationally aroused, and you're it's like puberty. It's like you're young. You could be 80. It doesn't matter. But you, oh, I'm so excited. I have these ideas, and you go out. Let's say to a party. You could take a walk. You meet somebody,
Right.
and all of a sudden you're writing a new book together. And somebody else comes by at the same party, and you get excited. You're doing a movie, and
Right.
then you're doing this. And you have everybody's cards. And this happened to me in my early days. Then you go home, and you look at these cards, and you don't exactly remember who they are, but you've committed your life to create with.
Right.
So one of the things you learn when you get vocationally aroused is you can go out dating, vocational dating, all you want.
Yeah.
However, if you commit to a project, like you're committing with Jeff to this,
Yeah, totally.
you don't forget it and do 6 other things that make it impossible for you to do this.
Absolutely.
That's promiscuous. And I even have to watch out for it at 82. Because if I'm with somebody new who's really exciting, and this may be an idea I've been harboring all my life, but somebody's coming along and wants to do that, it's easy for me to go like this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you choose like a major set of initiatives, like I have Birth 2012, the next 9 months is to help a planetary experience of exactly this.
Yes.
Well, I have to then keep my focus and not go off no matter how good the other projects are. So that's suprasexual promiscuity. And premature synergy is, we all want synergy because it helps people join to actually give their gift when somebody else is giving their gift, and you have a lot more energy. But if one person is much stronger than the others in a synergistic process, then everybody gets dependent on one person, and the other people don't have the capacity to do what they need to do, and then the one person who is being relied on tends to not be able to handle it and leave.
Interesting. Yep.
So to have synergy actually work, there has to be enough equality of capabilities. You can practice synergy in town meetings in the round and SynCons, but if you want to actually create a team with everybody doing a part that's vital, it's extremely important that these are mature parts and that they come together without one dominating or controlling the other. And so therefore, I'm sure this is what you're learning, is this collective we requires an evolution of the person.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Well,
you cannot be dominating or submitting or coming out of your egoic self. You can't do it. You'll break it up.
Well, I think too, one of the things that I've been teaching has to do with evolutionary mutuality. So there are certain dynamics between that if you're not paying attention to them, you're not aware of that there are things that are missing that don't fully activate what's happening between you. One of them is that there's symmetry between us. So I see, the way I experience the evolutionary impulse is that if you and I have maybe a similar level of capacity for intimacy or capacity for being very generative, making things happen, whatever it is, if we're similar, we can start to spark off each other. Just like I'm sure, like when you're with certain thinkers, you can talk, and then you get to the place where you don't know where you're going in the conversation because you're both capable of like playing tennis at that level. Whereas if you were talking to me possibly in that, in that particular vein, I might not be able to meet you there. So then I'm learning from you, but I'm not in that zone. And when you're in the zone, that's when it can take off. That's when the evolutionary impulse has permission to then take over the two of you. So I do think
that's right.
That's important to pay attention to.
I have noticed that with, I've noticed that with 1 or 2 people to where we don't even have a project. We just start and then it goes into this large sphere, and it's almost unlimitedly interesting and activating of more of your genius than you even you had, and you start to be so brilliant and so wonderful and so creative, that you actually evolve, you become an evolving human by this, and it may well be you can't evolve too far
Absolutely.
without this.
Well, I think there are new things to, like you were saying about the promiscuity, etc. You've been in this journey longer, so you've discovered and made mistakes and learned and found out what are the conditions, what are the conditions that we need in order to have this level of creativity be in work. Because there's certain things, just like if someone were to come to me and they had a more strategic partnership idea, it wouldn't happen. That level of magic doesn't happen. So there's, like, we're learning, what are the conditions, what screws it up, what supports it, what makes it stop.
This is very true.
And I think it's important.
It takes a lot of discernment, because sometimes you can be turned on by somebody else's creativity. It's very genuine.
Yeah.
And to discern that between that and something that has greater depth and greater longevity and can produce a baby is sometimes very discerning, because well, in the process of pregnancy and giving birth to a baby, there are lots of moments that aren't totally ecstatic.
For sure.
And this is where mother love comes in and father love, because for the baby, you really have to care a lot, because there's nothing more demanding than pregnancy and birth for the woman.
True.
So, and for the father, because if the father doesn't care for her and take care for the baby, then it's not going to often survive, even in the old days. So when we're giving birth to this expression of ourselves, a lot of the characteristics of deeply mothering and fathering a birth are there. It's quite tender, and I've been translating it on the planetary scale, and I believe there are planetary mothers, like you and I are. We're mothering part of the birth, and we're passionate about it.
Totally.
I mean, I get up in the morning sometime. I'm 82 years old. I'm rushing up. It's at 5:30 a.m. I am barely getting through my meditation because computer people I want to call. I mean, and I thought, this is really funny. And you know what? It also is true. It's regenerative.
Absolutely.
And I have coined this word regenopause for the women, particularly over 50, who fall in love with life purpose and creativity. That regenopause paves the way. You have no more eggs to reproduce the species. You are the egg. Because the feminine archetype in this culture is just now being revealed. This is not the old goddess. This isn't whatever the old feminine was.
Right.
Because then we had 5,000 years of top-down pyramidal patriarchal structure. Then it hit limits to that. I dated from the time of the atomic bomb. There was that brilliant genius understanding how nature works. Build a bomb, you can destroy the world, and on with all these technologies. So in the last 50, 60 years, suddenly we're entering the phase of conscious evolution. That means to say, on the personal level, on the social level, on the technological level, we have to guide the power.
Well, what's interesting, because I know your story of when you were you went to see Eisenhower and you were a teenager and you asked him, say the exact question, because I love your question.
I asked the question, what do you think is the meaning of our new powers that is good?
After the atomic bomb had gone off, right? Yeah,
this was actually with Eisenhower was 1952. He had just become president of the United States, and of course the bomb was in 1945. And I had been researching the question through philosophies, through world religions, through the Bryn Mawr College, trying to become an Episcopalian and trying to read the Bible and all of that. And there wasn't anything that could show you the meaning of the power as in this life and in evolving evolving world,
Right.
the evolving incarnation wasn't written up. It wasn't science fiction. It wasn't religion. So I got to ask my question of a lot of people, but the most interesting one was I was taken into the Oval Office, and he'd just been president. He was a friend of my father's, and he just said, "Hello, young lady, what can I do for you?" And he had no reason, to really be paying attention to me. So I said, "Mr. President, I have a question for you." "Yes, young lady." "What do you think is the meaning of all this new power that's good?" And he shook his head and he said, "I have no idea." And I thought, well, we better
find out, right?
And you know what? They still don't know. But you know who I think does know?
I think you know.
There's a type of person, I call it a universal human, who has internally a mysterious sense of what's emerging, of the future as an organism progressing toward the unknown, of somebody who can pick up the signals of what's being born.
Right.
Now that's a type. And it has, I call it an evolutionary ear. Like you have an ear for music, or you're a good athlete, or you're a really great mathematician. Those are really gifts. The ear for evolution is a gift. And I have found a lot of brilliant people do not have it.
It's true.
They don't see patterns. They don't see what my friend Claudia Wells calls evomimicry. Not only biomimicry, but evomimicry is mimicking evolution.
What's interesting, I feel like with the work that I'm doing and also taking the platform of doing this radio show, is to actually send the message out to, because it's a certain kind of DNA. It's like people that are, there are people that are interested in their own transformation. There are people that are interested in all kinds of things. But this particular frequency and message, all of a sudden it's like, bam, 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 like it goes out and then people go, "Oh my God, that's what I was listening for."
That's exactly right. And if you think of the planetary crisis and the timing factor and how severe certain problems are and how difficult to really deal with, like climate change, my intuition is that scattered throughout the human community, there are enough people with the ear for evolution.
Yep.
with the heart's desire to express and participate in what's emerging. And if we can reach enough of those people, just like on this show, and what Enlighten Next does, and what we're doing on Shift, and so many other things, there is a tendency for everything that rises to converge. And I've been thinking, Patricia, as to what facilitates convergence of what's emergent already, to connect quickly enough to avoid the very disastrous scenario that we can see. So I am assuming it's conception, co-creation, loving one another with an internet connection and a media outreach, and to reach as many human beings as possible. And they're probably from different cultures, different backgrounds, different ages, different colors. So the one thing they have in common is something that nobody even knows to call. It's a sense of evolution.
Yes, that's true. Well, it's interesting. One of the things I'd love to get your input with the Evolutionary Collective. We're working on the inner connectivity. Building that so that that's strong and real and honored. That it is the right context. But then I was thinking the next part is, what would be an evolutionary incubator? Because once people want to come to create together, Barbara, I found that there are missing structures of mutuality. People, there are old structures of how do you come together to actually do something. You have hierarchy, you have competition, you have, well, how do we share it? And I mean, we don't know how to do this in new ways, with legal things and money things, to put those things together so that these new children, these new babies have like a new way to come into the world that don't have the old, you don't put them in the old educational system.
No, you see, so one of the reasons we are social pioneers
Yeah.
as well as being spiritual and personal in our co-creativity, is the minute you want to express in this existing
And the way it's been
world,
done, right.
real world. All the old structures are top-down pyramid, and the monetary system is based on scarcity.
Yeah, totally.
So the idea of having to engender the resources, Bernard Lietol said, until we get economic and structures for economic democracy, it's going to be very hard to take this next step. So what we're learning, I think, is, you must be doing it yourself, is small-scale social entrepreneurship.
Right, right. Yep.
You see, you get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people together who want to co-create, who have this love for each other, and who have enough capacity to attract others to gain the resources to do it.
Right,
so
absolutely.
You're not... The 2 words I find very demoralizing is job and funding.
Right.
Because if you have to be hired by somebody else to do a job, if you're getting anywhere near doing what your creativity is. Some people are lucky enough. Maybe in these large, wonderful, creative companies, people are fortunate they get hired. Or like in Shift Network or Foundation for Conscious Evolution, there's some people hired, very, very few, but nonetheless they're doing what they're longing to do. But we have to gain the resources to do this, or we can't do it. You have whoops, I'm sorry. That is a good part that we're bringing out here. Also, I just want to say one word about SynCons. In the 70s, I did 25 conferences called Synergistic Convergence. And it's a new social architecture that's needed. And we actually pioneered in it.
Wow.
Instead of people speaking and sitting in rows or boardrooms, here's the CEO and here's this and here's this and that. What it is we built big theater in the round. You have people go into sectors of the wheel according to what they want to create. And the basic questions are, what do you want to create? What do you need to create it? What resources do you want to share? And then we look for common goals and match needs with resources, and we take down walls.
Wow.
And when you have an assembly of the whole, 100 people, if they're sitting in rows with a speaker, compared to their co-creating with all walls down, it's amazing.
Totally.
You create new social bodies. And I have a course now of guides and mentors where people have signed up because they want to participate in the birth. They want to be a global team. I'm calling it an evolutionary corps, CORPS. It's like we've had the Peace Corps, the
Evolutionary
Astronaut Corps. It's an evolutionary corps with a mission.
Yes.
And it's very interesting if you bring people together who have the evolutionary impulse. We have a newborn planetary organism. So it's not we've solved every problem, it's not we've done that, but enough of us are connected to know we can do it. That's the real thing. So when you get, let's say, hundreds of, I have 2,000 students that have been on the Agents of Conscious Evolution. When you get 2,000 people wanting to cooperate for a shared purpose, the structure in which they, and that's not even how to earn the money to do it. And I would say the cutting edge of genius right now is in the synergy.
And collaboration. I mean, one of the things I've found myself fascinated with, and are interviewing some different people as well, are people that are innovating those things, like, you know, around the internet, or, I mean, just the man who like created Wikipedia. I mean, all of those new inventions. And Charles Eisenberg, who's, you know, connected to the new ways of looking at sacred economy. I mean, we need, as much as the Supra-Sex, you know, that energy, how do we also then change the forms? And I think it's all one, you know, it's one big question that we're all finding our way together, because we do need both. And you, I mean, obviously doing the SynCon things, I mean, that was like 40 years ago. That's amazing.
Here's a whole
Okay.
system. Whole system. If you take the wheel of
Yeah.
co-creation, the big wheel, right at the hub, the impulse of evolution is coming through you and me right now. And we feel resonance, we feel revelation, we might even feel inspiration to create. Okay, when you go out into sectors of the wheel, every sector has its global co-creators. Those are the people you're talking about. But they're in sectors and they're actually part of a living organism.
So sectors meaning, just for the audience, like finance,
sectors
education,
meaning,
right.
Organic functions. So you take like someone in information technology or someone in new energy systems. It's not only they're a genius, but they're part of the whole system genius.
Right.
So you always have to see what's the unique genius and where does it fit in the whole. So every one of the geniuses at the growing edge are part of the whole system.
Yes.
They need to be connected that way. Then you take projects already working. They don't have to be total innovative geniuses to be doing something that's working in education, in health, in relationship. You have what I would call a project that works.
Definitely.
Because you have a field of evolutionary collaboration and co-creation, and your pioneer serves to evolve a system. You're not just fixing up a problem.
Right. No, it was created from the evolutionary impulse purely. Yeah.
Problem. Are evolving an organic function in the social body.
In the larger system,
and it does. And if you take an overview perspective on the whole system as a living whole system organism on planet Earth, just take a big overview like the astronauts saw Earth from space. Mm-hmm. That was a miracle at that moment, and we changed our consciousness with that one picture. The next great picture, I believe, is a picture of the living system of the noosphere and the mind sphere and the global co-creators and the innovators seen as members of a living body. And I've been asking artists, what's the best way to envision the whole being born? You see, we don't have that image in the arts. Yeah. I asked Alex Gray, for example, who's one of the great artists of our time, particularly showing the person coming alive, being alive with universal energies. And Alex said, I'm working on it. So I know Ken Wilber has a lot of what he calls integral artists. And I think could well be a multimedia art form. Yeah,
that sounds right.
That we can see Earth as a living system. And I think when we see ourselves as what's really so, I'm not making this up, it's not a metaphysical vision, it's actually so. Just like Earth was one planet, you wouldn't know that if you're walking out your next door to get somewhere. You wouldn't know. Much less know you're in a planetary organism that's going around the sun, that's doing all that. We have extended nervous system here.
Yeah, it's true. And it's happening. I mean, you can tell with the young people, because I interviewed Jason Silva. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's my son's age. He's 30 years old. And he is the evolutionary impulse. He didn't even know that you would have called it that, but it is just so alive in him. And he's so turned on about, the fact the Ray Kurzweil, the singularity and, the future looks so unlimited to him because of the way that things are hooking up and the science and the rest of it. And he was just, he was saying like he was sort of depressed, but then once he got hooked into that vision, which is an evolutionary vision, he got turned on. He can hardly, you can hardly like listen to him. He's so ecstatic. I was exhausted.
There's a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, Peter Diamandis. He's just written a book called Abundance. The future is better than you think.
Yeah, that sounds.
It's just published, and it's really good because he says we get a negative view of the future by the way it's interpreted it. And by the way, it's constantly showing us what the problems are, so that the average person doesn't have a clue as to what's emerging, what's created.
Oh my God.
And that's a problem. So I'm all for, that's what I ran for vice president on.
Yeah, well, these young guys, besides us,
they're already doing it.
I think the way that the evolutionary impulse is particularly igniting the young people is through the science and the rest of it. They're just beyond, like the cyborg, level of it. But it's true, So I want to ask you before we run out of time. Do you want to, I found your new book, Emergence, which I had read the previous version of it, but it's been edited and it's just beautiful, really gives people a way to access, their own connection to that kind of creativity. Do you want to say anything about it? Because it's really wonderful.
I just got the new version of it. Just
Emergence.
Today. Emergence, the shift from ego to essence. Here is the essence of it. Most of us have higher self, inspirational. I was a journal writer. I kept getting so many higher experiences. But then when I went out to do everything, it was my local self trying to get it done.
Right.
And I realized I was compulsive and never felt I could fulfill something. So I created a new meditation, and I put my attention on the feeling of receiving that higher guidance, and let the local self come in and go into an inner sanctuary until it could feel its own higher self. And gradually the higher self came in as a frequency into my heart, into my being, all the way through all the chakras, and the local self fell in love with its own essence. Mm-hmm. And emergence is about actually shifting your identity. No matter how you see the higher guidance, that's not who you are. To seeing I am that essence.
It's beautiful.
Educating my locals. I am that myself, but I forget and I cry and I panic. And then you go through childhood where you have to relate to other people like a toddler. Going to kindergarten of godlings, I call it, because we're each internal God force. But when we get with each other through youth is your second puberty. That's vocational arousal. That's where you get suprasexually overexcited, because you could be 80 or 8. You want to create. And so this book, I'm teaching with also my sister Patricia Ellsberg. We'll do that on Shift Network. It's about making a shift of identity at the time of a
Definitely. We're going to run out of time, so I just want to make sure that people know how to get that and how to find out more about what you're doing. It's evolve.org. Simple. If they forget it's Barbara Marx Hubbard, they can always find everything through your name as well.
Yes.
And the book, just to say that it's a guide. It actually will take people all the way through that process, and it's a process you went through. So it's really very, very meaningful.
It is.
Yeah, definitely.
And it keeps on growing.
So I want to thank you again. I want to mention to people what's happening next week, but just from my heart, that you have lived with the kind of courage,
Patricia,
and love and joy that you have exuded for your 82 years. I mean, I am all I could ever want is to be as much like you as you are.
Well, I'm sure you are, Patricia. Thank you so very much, and I love you and the work you're doing, and encourage everybody who's connected with you. Thank you.
Thank
you so much. It's
and I just want to mention to everyone, next week, on Tuesday, our show will be with Tamar Stone, and it's called Who's Driving Your Inner Car? And it's actually a little bit, also about what Barbara was talking about. We have these different selves, and we need to be able to find how to create that unified whole.